Hmm. I mean, that kind of brings me to, this final question, which is kind of this grandiose question that, you can go multiple ways with, but what is the cost of justice?
That's a fantastic question. And there is a price. There is a price. When you're a private attorney, I can explain a little bit of the law of the land. And when someone comes to you, they pay you a retainer.
Right.
They give you a fee, and you may base your retainer on the stages of the proceeding. They say, okay, this is how much here, this is how much here, and this is how much here. And then if it goes to trial, this is how much it's going to cost you. So you have to put a dollar amount on your time. You have to evaluate where you're going to be at a certain point in time.
Hmm.
And for a lot of people, quite frankly, they just ran out of money. They'd say, I want to go to trial. I want to go to trial. I want to go to trial. I want to have my day in court where I want to confront my accusers, which is your constitutional right. It's your constitutional right to have a jury trial. But I'm an attorney that's running a business. You know, you've given me so much money. Now that money's gone. It's consumed. What do I do? Do I keep on in the case? Well, I guess I could if I just want to stay on as an advocate pro bono, which means for free. Well, I can't do that at the sake of other clients that are actually paying me money. That wouldn't be fair to them.
Hmm.
So ultimately, towards the latter part of my career, I was making more and more applications to courts to be relieved as counsel because I wasn't being paid. Clients were running out of money. So there is a cost to justice. And especially if you have a private attorney, there's a cost. And at some point, people say uncle and they break the bank. And from my experience, I dealt a lot with the prosecutor's office that I once worked in, and I was the head of sex crimes and child abuse and vehicular homicide. So I would say that I was a worthy adversary, or I was a pain in their ass, you know, because I would put them to the test or challenge them on cases. When I had an assistant prosecutor on a case, I would say to them, look, I appreciate what you're doing. I did it myself. But you need to know your file. You need to know your evidence. And I quite frankly see some problems here. So they didn't want to have that conversation with me. And ultimately, the system would allow for them meaning the state, to bring me back to court multiple times unnecessarily. Nothing would be happening with the case. We go to court. They hadn't turned over police reports. They hadn't interviewed a witness. They weren't ready to move forward. They needed to do this. They needed to do that. And the judges would allow that. The judges would say, okay, we'll see you in a month. We'll see you in a month. We'll see you in a month. Well, wait a minute. If somebody's in custody, that month is like an eternity.
Yeah.
You know, if that's your kid, if that's my kid, if that's your family member, your brother, your sister, they want their day in court and they deserve that. Well, I had one case where I think I appeared 18 times, 18 times, and nothing was happening. And I would say, Judge, this is ridiculous. What are we doing here? This is not working out. We got to get our day in court. When are we going to pick a jury? Let's pick a jury. And back in the earlier days when I was a prosecutor, it was much easier to pick a jury. You didn't have to block out, a month in advance, a panel of jurors to come in and get 100 people to question as to whether or not they're going to be selected as potential jurors in the case. Now it's so much more complicated. They had to block out all this time. So, I hate to say it, but more and more in recent years, I had to make those applications to be relieved as counsel. And I'd say to my clients, I'm so sorry. I can't continue on in your case. I'm not being paid, and I've got an office to run. I got staff to pay. I've got to pay overhead. I got to pay for my rent,
Hmm.
you know, and I just couldn't afford to continue on in those cases. And some of them were very big cases. And as much as I hated to walk away, and, they, it happened more and more. And one case in particular that comes to my mind right off the top of my head, it's um, a guy was accused of raping a prostitute and stealing from her. And I told him, I said, look, I can't continue on your case. You owe me a lot of money. And I'm just staying in this case because I'm hoping at some point cooler heads are going to prevail. I had sent a proposal to the prosecutor about trying to resolve the case, and they basically rejected it out of hand. And so I filed a motion to be relieved, and we went into court, and I had served him with the motion. I explained it to him. I met with him in the jail. I talked to him. I said, I'm so sorry I got to do this, but I got to get out of your case. I can't do it.
Mhm.
You know, and I see your case going to trial probably 6, 7 months from now. And he said, I completely understand. So we went in front of the judge, and the judge was mad at me for making the motion to be relieved as his attorney, because we were moving along and we were getting closer and closer to trial. So the judge looked over at to him and said, hey, what do you think of your attorney filing this motion to get out of your case? And to his credit, he looked over at me and he looked at the judge and he said, well, the last time I checked, he ain't working for free.
Wow.
And with that, the judge signed the order. I was out of the case.
Wow.
And wouldn't you know that that guy went to trial, and the proposal I sent in writing to the prosecutor, all the other charges that I said were going to be dismissed were dismissed, and he was found guilty of a gun charge, and that's what he was sentenced on.